welcome everyone. Thank you for making it here. It's such a nice medium that we have, that we can still be in community, but also have the comfort of home. Practicing this way can be interesting and challenging at first, but it's become quite nice. I've enjoyed it. Somebody who takes my classes online was saying she loves the combination of the community and the home practice together. Just a little bit more freedom that she's been able to find in her practice, and so there's a deepening that happens through the comfort of our home. So thanks for being here. So Ashby mentioned restorative yoga and yin yoga. Yin yoga is a little bit different than restorative yoga. It still has the same qualities of stillness and long-held postures and relaxed breath. But in yin yoga, we actually want a little bit of pull and compression on the tissues. And so we want to feel sensation, where restorative yoga, where we don't want as much sensation. And so if you're in a posture and it's a bit challenging, or if you feel a little bit of pull, or if there's some kind of stretch going on, that's okay, that's fine. And what we want to try to do is relax around that sensation. We don't want like an extreme sensation. We want something that's not too little, not too much. Sometimes it's called like the Goldilocks position. So not too much stress, not too little stress, something in between. Today's sequence, we're going to kind of work around the thigh a lot. And so in the thigh, it's considered to have 4 quadrants of muscle groups. And so we have our quadriceps, we have our adductors, adductors, inner legs, groin, hamstrings, and then our abductors, which are kind of the glutes and the external rotators and the IT band. They're in these 4 quadrants, these 4 fascial packages. And so each muscle group is surrounded in this fascial package, and then wrapping around that 4 quadrant group is a bigger sheet of fascia called the fascia lata, if you've ever heard of that. These muscles are big, there's lots of tissue there, and they get very, very tight. And so we're just going to work on putting some gentle traction on these places just to create a little bit more space, a little bit more fluidity within the tissue. And that's our intention, that's our goal. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get going. But let's just start in a meditation seat. I always like to begin just with a little focused meditation, just drawing some inward attention. And so finding a comfortable seat, but really want to feel the grounding here. So through the sits bones, through the legs, this weighted base. And then out of that weighted base, we have the spine that just sort of floats out of that weighted base. Not aggressively lifting, but just sort of just floating out of. It's like this pillar of strength that's slowly rising up. And it's really beneficial to have that so we can just relax the shoulders and the other tissues off of the spine. Lifting out of the crown, and then the face can soften, the eyes can soften. And we just want to just feel the body. And I want you to see if you can feel the body from the inside out. So from its depth to the surface. Now, different than thinking about the body, I want you to actually feel into the body. Visualization can be helpful here, but not required. So what does it feel like to just be in a body right here and right now? Can you feel into the bones themselves? As you do this, what do you notice? What do you discover? Can you feel into the organs, the heart and the lungs, the digestive system? Can you feel into the muscles, the tendons, the ligaments? Can you feel into the brain, the eyes, the neck? As we feel into, we're just beginning to become familiar with how we're feeling, but also becoming familiar with how this is constantly changing. There's no concrete way we feel all the time. This practice of yin yoga is naturally introspective, because what I'm going to ask you to do when we start to do postures is to focus on a particular area. And I'm going to ask you to feel particular things. And so it's not about the shape of the body, or if you're doing it correctly, or if your alignment's correct. It's all about what you're feeling. So it's a little bit of a different way of approaching practice. And so tuning into the body and what's happening. How does it feel now? But just a few more breaths here, just sitting, familiarizing ourselves with our own experience. Let's just take a nice big inhale through the nose, filling up, expanding the belly, the rib cage, the shoulders, and the head. And then a natural exhale out of the mouth. Do it again. Inhale, breathing, expand in all directions. And then a natural exhale out of the mouth. And again, inhale. And exhale. And we'll just come into a nice, natural, easy rhythm of breath, as natural as possible. And let's just come forward for a moment. And we're just going to come into a tabletop position, a yoga tabletop, not a Pilates tabletop. And just start to move through the spine. Yeah, just do some cows and some cats. Just feel into the body. So you might circle the hips around. You might settle the hips back towards a child's pose. Keeping it intuitive, just moving into the places and spaces that might just need a little bit of extra space, attention. Nothing is wrong here. And so using or coming from that perspective of inner seeing, so from the inside out. It's one of the other things that's really nice about practicing at home like this is our guard is let down a little bit. And so we can maybe try some different things. Allow ourselves to look a little silly at times. It's good. And then let's come back to a seat again, same seat we started in. We're just going to start in this pose we call shoelace posture. Many different ways to do this. I'm going to start with the right leg on top of the left leg. So if you can see how I'm doing it, My ankle is on top of my knee, just stacked there. But this isn't going to be appropriate for everybody. So you might try stacking the knees. So this may be a different pose, but it does the same thing. What we're trying to get is a stretch in the outer leg, so the glutes, those abductors is what we call them. So you might stack the knees. My knees don't really stack. It just doesn't happen in my body. So anywhere from here to here is going to be okay. You could even bring this foot forward out on the ground. Or if you have a block or a stack of books or something, you could put the foot on a block. Really, any way that works. Some people need to bring their legs nice and wide and put this foot out like this. Again, if we're looking for a sensation here, we're all going to look probably a little bit different just because we're made up. Our bodies are all very different. And then once you find something, just find a little bit of a lift. You may also benefit from sitting on something. If your pelvis is tilted back, you're having a hard time sitting up. And then we're just going to come out just into a nice passive fold. Just move down gradually. You can rock a little bit side to side as you come down. You may even come all the way down where your head is hanging. But feel free to use props here. You could put your head on a block. You could put your elbows on a block. Again, what I'm concerned with here is just getting a nice stretch on this outer leg. Again, it doesn't have to be big. I want the stretch to be broad. Again, that Goldilocks feeling of not too much, not too little, though this one can be pretty intense. And then once you find the place, then you just soften the breath to a nice natural flow. Now, if this pose isn't working, you could come to your back and do what we call eye of the needle, which looks like this. I'm sure you're familiar with this one. And just allow the breath to take over. Allow gravity to take over. And relax as much as you can, especially in the target area itself. Notice where you feel this most intensely, and then soften around that space. Typically hold yin postures from 3 to 5 minutes. This one, probably just do about 3. We want to be patient and gentle and kind with our body. And after we hold this posture for a certain amount of time, you might start to feel the body opening a bit. That's what we want. But sometimes the opening is very subtle. We might not feel anything at all, not much opening at all. Doesn't mean nothing's happening. We want to let go of our expectations here. And any sort of goal-oriented orientation here. We just want to be exactly where we are. Monitoring the body from a very broad place where we're just noticing the sensations as they arise and fall away. We're noticing the sounds around us rise and fall away. We're noticing the air on the skin. And all these things that are happening around us that can become very normal to the point where we don't notice them. But now we make a point to notice, observe, feel. Now, because we're in this passive forward fold, you might feel strong sensations in the back. That's fine. There's always bonus sensations that happen in every pose. And we keep the breath very gentle, but you might begin to emphasize the exhale. Letting the exhale empty all the way to the very bottom. And at the very bottom, there might be just a pause for a few milliseconds before the inhale happens again. This exhale is directly related to our parasympathetic nervous system, the part of our nervous system that's associated with rest and relaxation and digestion. It sends a message to the brain that everything is good, everything's okay. So pay attention to the exhale. Just a few more breaths here. Good. You begin to slowly, gently make your way back up. Again, moving very, very slowly. Don't want to shock the system. And just pause here at the top. We're pulling on the tissue, and as we're doing that, we may create certain temporary vulnerabilities in the body, so we don't want to just snap out of the posture. We want to move very slowly, allow the body to adapt to movement again. Good. Yeah. And then we're just going to simply switch sides. Maybe you lengthen the legs out for a moment and shake them a bit, but then I want to just come right into the other side. This side might be completely different, so we treat it as if it's a new posture. So it might be a completely different shape. That's fine. Now, something I didn't mention on the other side is the use of a block underneath the knee. So if the knee's pretty far away from the ground or the leg, you can put a block underneath there. The block just allows you to relax. Also protects. Again, we're searching for the stretch on the outer, or the sensation on the outer hip here, the glutes, IT band. And then once you find it, you can just fold forward. And again, it's not necessary that you completely come down. You could stay even a little bit lifted. Sometimes I'll just sit straight up like this. And I feel it just fine. Different days require different things. So what's appropriate for you now? Ashby mentioned that we were fascia friends. And we talk about it, think about it often. And yin yoga is especially helpful with the fascia, which is, you can think of it as like, the fascia is the structure of the body. If you took everything out of the body except for the fascia, you would still have a body. You'd still have the architecture of the muscles. You'd still have the architecture of the brain, of the lungs, everything in the body. Yeah. And so it's in and around and over and through every system in the body, down to the cellular level, up to the layer right underneath the skin. And this fascia is made up of mostly water, and we all know we are mostly water, like around 70%. And this water is different consistencies throughout the body. That's why sometimes, when we wake up in the morning, we kind of move around and stretch. That's our fascia sort of going from this more solid gel-like state into a more liquid state. And so in yin yoga, we pull on these tissues, and that pulling sort of starts to create that more liquid state that we want. It's like I said, the fascia is moving throughout the body, and so the muscles slide against one another. If they don't slide, they get real gummy, and it becomes more difficult to move. We start to create these more liquid atmospheres, and the muscles start to slide much more efficiently and easily. It seems like every day we're learning more and more about fascia and what it does. It's not only a physical system, but it's a communication system. It's very, very interesting. Just take a few more breaths here. Good. Let's begin to come up very slowly. And just as we did before, let's come upright and pause. And then let's kind of lean back on the hands. And then we'll bring the legs out, actually the feet out in front of us, walk the heels in, and just drop the knees from side to side. Call this windshield wiper. I'm going to keep the windshield wipers on low or delay. Not on high speed. It's very slow. You feel the hips moving around, the femurs rolling around in the hip socket. And then let's extend the right leg out along the ground. I'm just going to bring the left foot to the inside of the thigh. Our target now is going to be the hamstrings, but for many of us, we have very tight hamstrings. And so you might put like a blanket underneath the knee, or a block, or whatever you have lying around, something supportive. You might even sit up on something, elevate a little bit, again, especially if your hamstrings are tight. And I want you to explore this. So 4 hamstrings along the back. Some people say 3, but also be 4. It's kind of a trick question in anatomy sometimes. And I want you to just find a little lift and then just fold out and over, right over the leg, and see how that affects the back of the leg. What's that feel like? Where do you feel it? What's the sensation? What's the quality of sensation? Is it broad? Is it narrow? Is it whatever? And then just come back up and then see about folding a little bit to the outside of the leg. And then what's that feel like? And then come back up, fold to the inside of the leg and see what that feels like. Maybe you can come back up and move even more inside. All I'm trying to do is find a stretch across the back of the leg. One of those positions is going to be optimal for you. Once you find it, you have another choice to make. You can either just round over, or you can keep the spine fairly extended. Some people even situate a prop over their leg and lie on that. That's great too. And we're just trying to get a nice, simple sensation, broad, mild, sustainable sensation on the leg. And something I like to do, I've found very helpful, is just the slightest, like micro sway. You might not even notice it from the outside. It's a little bit of a rock side to side. Sometimes there's this teaching in some yin yoga classes that we're never supposed to move. But that's just not true. We don't never want to become too rigid. And as the body opens, we can use some movement to accommodate that opening and to assist in that opening. Never want to do anything too aggressive. But in yin-yang theory, there's nothing that's ever completely yin and completely yang. There's always a degree of both. That's why when you look at the symbol, the yin and yang symbol, you have that like raindrop shape on either side. One's dark, one's light. But within the dark and within the light, there's an opposite dot right in the middle. Meaning that nothing is ever purely yin and nothing is ever purely yang. There's always a degree of both. And the type of movement that we would do, that I see you doing now, is a very yin thing. It's introspective, it's curious. There are times you might become still and see and notice, and if movement's necessary again, then you do that. Hamstrings can be stubborn, and rather than trying to force them open, we gently coax them open. It's like it's their idea to open rather than ours. So how can we create those conditions? Another half minute here. Is there any more space available to relax into? Let's begin to slowly come up. And just being upright for a moment. And then much like the last pose, we'll just lengthen the legs out, perhaps shake them a little bit, and we'll just switch sides. So again, we explore again the same way, so patiently exploring this curiosity about the body. Fold out over the leg. Yeah, see what that feels like. You come back up. Fold over that outside. And you come back up slowly, keeping the awareness in the back of the leg to the inside. And just where does it feel most beneficial? Broad. Again, we're not going for extremes of sensation. So that's broad, mild, and sustainable. And again, you have that option to slightly sway, move a bit. You might, when you do that, you might notice this really intimate connection between the hamstrings and the lower back. The hamstrings in lots of places. Our body is one interconnected system. There's nothing in isolation. Again, the fascia is interconnected. It's one system. Nothing's in isolation. Keeping our breath at the center again, just another reminder, the exhale. A slow pulsation of the breath. Just another 30 seconds here. Is there any more space? Let's begin to come out of this slowly, coming up. Just upright for a moment. And now let's just crawl forward. Come out and just move around through the spine again. It's a lot of forward folding we just did. And so move around through the hips, the spine. Downward dog can be nice. We just kind of worked into the hamstrings. You might pedal the heels a bit, even lifting the legs, just getting some energy moving. It's always nice to do. And then we're just going to crawl out to our belly. And just take a little rest for a moment. Make a little pillow with your hands and just lay flat. And then from here, let's just come up to a Sphinx pose, but we're not going to be here very long. We're just going to use this to get into another pose. So we start in Sphinx. And then we'll slide the right knee along the ground. So next to the hip. And you might even walk the left foot over a bit, just so you're just kind of walking the left leg over. And then bring the left elbow forward, so you're propped up on your head, on your hand, actually. Now, this is where you might need your belt or your strap. Maybe you don't. Let's bend the left leg, and then we'll grab the left foot with the right hand. Now, let's kick into the hand, but at the same time pull the foot towards you, so creating a little bit of tension. And that might allow you to bring that left knee over just a bit. Call this cattail pose. And we use this for a twist, but today we're going to use it as a quad or a hip flexor opener. So now let go of the kicking and just pull the heel in towards the butt. And so you might get a nice juicy stretch there. If you don't, I'll give you another option of something else to do. This is a nice way to get a quadricep or a hip flexor stretch without putting a lot of pressure on the knee, so you're in control of it. And then from here, you might just lengthen out the left arm and make a little pillow with your arm. Put your head down on your bicep or shoulder. And just rest. The other option, if that's not working for you in the quadricep, in the hip flexor area, is to come into what we call half saddle. So you just come to a seat and then bring the left foot next to the left hip. And again, working up the quadriceps or the hip flexors, you could begin to lean back. Yeah, but most people get something in the cattail. Quadriceps, very big muscles, again, that get tight very easily, and they're not very easy to stretch. There's only a few movements that stretch the quadriceps, and they're not like movements that we do very often. They're not super available for a lot of people, but it's really important that we get in there. And then the hip flexors as well. So we have the psoas, the iliopsoas. Another important muscle, a muscle that connects the two halves of the body, connects the lower back to the femur, which is an interesting connection, relationship. And again, it's not necessary to pull really hard. You just want a broad, mild Goldilocks. Stretch. Notice where your mind is, notice where your breath is. Always gently bringing the mind back in, using the breath. Just gently release the foot. So we don't want it to snap away. Just gently release the foot. And then lengthen the right leg back out and just lie on the belly for a moment. Make a little pillow with your arms or hands. Let's come back up to the Sphinx. So the other side of the cattail now. And so we'll bring the left knee forward. Right elbow forward. We'll lean over onto the right ribs. And you want to be like on the front of the right hip. And then walk the right foot over. Bend right leg. Grab foot, left hand. Kick and pull to get maybe the knee goes over a little bit more. And then just pull in. You might reach the right arm out. Yeah. Very nice posture. And then we're not emphasizing the twisting part here. You're probably still feeling a twist, which is nice. There's all kinds of stuff you'll feel here. Maybe a little shoulder, chest opening, maybe some left outer hip opening. But we're mostly concerned with the right leg. Scan your body and looking for any places of tension. Sometimes it hides in the gripping of the teeth, or in the hands, or the feet, or the tongue, the eyes. Waves of awareness just moving through the body, dissolving any tension. in the yin yoga practice, physically, we're getting much deeper into the body. And so I mentioned the fascia, pulling on the fascia, but we're also loading the tendons and the ligaments, the bones even. Putting a little bit of stress on these places so that they become stronger, more elastic, more relevant. If the tissues don't get stressed, if they don't get worked, then they tend to atrophy and get weak. And so we're creating a nice fluid environment with relevant tissue that's elastic and strong. And so yin yoga in this way, it can be considered as exercise. If we define exercise as putting some stress on the physical body to create positive change. That's what we're doing here. It's a different style. It's a yin style. And we need both yin and yang forms of exercise to be healthy. Good, let's lengthen, back out, let go of that right foot, lengthen the left leg back out, and just make a little pillow with your arms. When we lie neutral like this in between postures, we call it the rebound. So we're just trying to just observe what's going on, feeling the effect of the posture, energetically, physically, mentally, emotionally. You know, the poses can create all kinds of response. And so we're just simply observing. We begin to move again, maybe wiggle the hips a bit side to side, stretch very long, breathe deeply, compress yourself back to fours, move around through the hips and the spine again, downward dog. Again, whatever feels appropriate, intuitive. And then we're just going to come to a seat. I'll give you a couple different options. So remember, we're doing the 4 quadrants of the thigh. The only one we haven't done now is the inner legs. And so different option here is, one option is to bring the legs wide. We call this dragonfly in yin. I always like to sit up on something just so I can ensure that the pelvis is tilted forward. And again, we don't have to make an extreme angle, just enough to get a sensation. So inner legs, maybe a little bit on the backs of the legs. If this is really tough for you, if these tissues are super tight, you could always bring a little bend to the knees. The other option here is to come into what we call butterfly, and you might bring the heels in rather tight to the pelvis. So you'll get some activation there as well. So you might try both. And then when you're ready, we'll start to tilt forward. I always like to keep the spine fairly active in the beginning, just to get the pelvis forward, because the pelvis tilting forward is required in order for us to get a stretch here, most of us. And you might just stay here with an extended spine, or you can start to round out, maybe completely dropping, or putting something underneath the chest. or the head, or maybe just holding yourself up with your hands or arms. You can always like to wiggle around a bit at the beginning of a posture, just working into the sensation, and then eventually finding some stillness. But again, like I mentioned before, it's always relative. Check in with the breathing. Again, a breath that lets go, emphasis on the exhale. Allow the body to open, soften. Breathing space and kindness, softness. Just giving yourself a lot of space. Just one more minute here. A little bit more. A little bit more room. Let's begin to come back up very slowly. Unless you want to stay longer, you always have the freedom to stay longer. And just come back into a simple seat once again. Feeling the rebound of the practice, of the pose. And just tuning in, feeling from the inside out, from the depths of the body and the mind out. This is a very good time in our lives to embrace the yin aspects of life. It's so important in a yang, focused world. We embrace the yin as well because life seeks balance. And in Eastern medicine, balance equates with optimal health. And so we can see this time as an opportunity to tune into and to create the balance that all of us need. I want to thank each of you deeply for your practice, for showing up to your mat today. And I want to thank Ashby and Yoga Highlands for hosting me. It's always such a pleasure, and hopefully we'll be able to do some more in the coming weeks and months. Namaste.